Hello my friends, today we are gonna be building Node.js social media application REST API, and in the next tutorial we will build this React application and we are gonna use this awesome API. And also we will be using MongoDB. We will create, update and delete our own collections and the documents. In the API we are gonna create register and login authentication. And then for users router, we will write update, delete and get methods. We will be able to follow and unfollow any users. And after that, we will create posts, update and delete them and like or dislike any post. And finally, we are gonna fetch all timeline posts according to following users. For now, it's gonna lack custom error handling or JWT authorization. We will cover all these features in the next tutorials. If you want to improve your Express and MongoDB REST API skills, it's gonna be really useful for you. So if you are ready, let's get started. Okay, firstly I'm gonna initialize my Node application. I will write here npm and init. It's gonna ask me some questions about this application. I will just enter all of this and it's ready. Firstly, I'm gonna add some libraries here that we will use in our REST API. So I will come here, yarn, or if you are using npm, you can write npm install. I'm gonna use yarn and add express, mongoose, and .env, helmet, morgan, and nodemon. Let's create them and I will explain why we are using them. And Express, as you know, it's the Node.js framework. We are gonna build our application on this framework. So basically our server will run on this Express. Second is Mongoose. It helps us to create our Mongo models that we can create our documents inside MongoDB, like users, posts, or whatever. And third one will be .env. After creating MongoDB, it's gonna give us some secret URL which includes our database, server name and our username and password. So if you use it directly, someone can steal it and use for his purpose. So we have to hide it somewhere in safe. So not only that URL, any keys, any secret keys and any passwords you can keep inside this env file. And next one is helmet. When we start making requests to server, it's gonna help us to stay secure because when you make requests, the request header carries some vulnerable properties inside it. So helmet prevents some of them and adds some new properties for extra security. And Morgan, it's a request logging middleware. Whenever you make a request to server, it's gonna return us which request has been made, what was the result, and how long it took. So we can see our results in our console here. So next one is nodemon. When you create a Node application, whenever you make a change inside of any of your files here, you have to come to console and say restart all the time. So nodemon allows us to start server once, and anytime we change something inside our application, it's gonna refresh the application. So it's kinda listening our files here. So here we are not gonna use any test. I will say start. To use nodemon, I will come here and say nodemon and our main file, which is index.js. We don't have any file here. Let's create. Okay, I will close here and this one. So we can create our express here. Const express, and it's gonna require express. Okay, and after that we can create our application and express. That's all. So how I'm gonna use this application, I will say app.listen. I can indicate here any specific port. I will say 8800. It's gonna be our port. And after that, I will just console log this. And I will say backend server is ready or is running. Let's try. You can write here npm, or if you are using yarn like me, start. And as you can see, backend server is running. Perfect. If I make any changes inside this file or any other files, let's save. As you can see, NodeMon refreshed this page again. So I'm gonna add other libraries here. Mongoose.env, Helmet, and Morgan. To use .env, I should come here and say config. So it's ready to use. I will create here my env file .env, and inside this we can write any secret keys here. Okay, let's close them. And here, this is my MongoDB cluster. You can create quickly through this address. It's totally free. And right here, I will say connect and choose connection method. And here you can use Mongo shell or this application, or you can manage this in your code as we will do. I will choose this, and this one will be our secret URL. I will come here and inside Mongo URL, and here you should write your username and password, and here it's gonna be our database. Social. I will write here my name and password, and we will continue. And after that, I will go to documentation of this Mongoose, and for connection, I will just copy this and paste here, and it's gonna be our secret URL. So I will say process and env and our secret key name, Mongo and URL. And after that, I will create just a function, and it's gonna console log our connection connected to Mongo. Let's see. Backend server, of course it's server. There's an error here. It wants to add this one also to our connection. Let's see right now. Awesome. So we created our application and we created our MongoDB connection. After that, I can write my middlewares here. Let's close this. And I will also make this a little bit bigger. Okay. And underneath, I will say app.use. Firstly, I'm gonna use express.json. It's a body parser. When you make post request, it's just gonna parser it. So after that, I'm gonna use helmet. And after that, Morgan. You have some options here. You can check the Morgan documentation, but I'm just gonna use common one. So if you are not familiar with Express and Node.js and you don't know what the middleware is, how to use them, you can check description below because it's gonna be a quick tutorial. I'm not gonna explain everything from scratch. So let's try our application. I will say get. And for home page, for example, I will create some function here and say, of course, inside our request and response and JSON or send, welcome to home page. Okay, let's try. Our port is 88. I will come here and say localhost And here, as you can see, welcome to homepage is here. If I change here, let's say, for example, users, let's separate them. Users, welcome to user page. If I write here users, perfect. And by the way, Morgan is working like that. Your date and request type and address and status, and this is our duration of the response. So everything is under control here. And of course we are creating REST API, so we are not gonna use them, and instead we are gonna create our routes here. So let's create folder, and it's gonna be routes, and inside this let's create first users.js. To create router, I will say const and router and require express, of course in code, and after that I will write here router. To use it in the index file, I should export it. I will say module and exports, and it's gonna be router. So I can use this here. Let's say here const user route. It's gonna be our path, route and users. So I can use this. After this middlewares, I will say app.use, and it's gonna be our address for REST API. Let's say API and users. So whenever we go to this address, it's gonna run this router. Let's say user route. So let's try here. I will say router dot get, and for the home page of user API, request and response, and it's gonna send us, hey, it's user routes. Okay, let's try. Our API first and users. I forgot something again here. It should be users. So refresh again. Hey, it's user route. Awesome. So we are gonna do all our user things inside this router. It's gonna be delete user, update user, get one, get whole users, or something like that. So I can use create and login users here also, but I prefer using another router. It's gonna be auth.js, and I will just copy this and here, and I will change here, and in index file I will just call this one, and here it's gonna be singular, and after that I will call this here. Let's try. Okay, awesome. So let's create our models here. I will create new folder here, models, and inside first one will be user.js. I'm gonna call our mongoose here and require mongoose. Firstly, we are gonna build our user schema, and it's gonna new mongoose.schema, and inside this we are gonna create our properties. First one will be username, and type will be string, and you can indicate here any restriction. For example, require, it's gonna be true because it has to be a username for a user, and after that minimum 3 characters for this name and maximum, let's say 20. And it should be unique because I don't want the same username for any other user. And after that I will create email, and it's gonna be type string again, and required, and max, let's say 50, and it should be unique again. Let's create password, type string, and required, and minimum character will be 6, and maximum, don't write maximum. Okay. And after that it's gonna be a profile picture, and type string, and when we create a user it's gonna be a default value, and I can write here default, and it's gonna be an empty string here. I will do the same thing for the cover picture. They are not required here, but when we create new one it's gonna be empty image here. So I can add here followers and followings. Type will be array because we are gonna keep user IDs inside this array. For example, 5 people are following you and they are their user ID. When they follow you, we are gonna add any numbers inside this array like this. So by default it's gonna be empty again. I will say empty array. So I will do the same thing for following people. And what else I can say is admin. Type will be boolean, and by default it's gonna be false. When we create any user it's not gonna be admin, it's gonna be false. Okay, so to use this user schema I should export it, and I'm gonna use it inside users and auth also. So I will come here and module and exports and mongoose.model, and inside this I will write here model name user, and after that it's gonna be our user schema. So I want to create here timestamps. Whenever you create a user or update this, it's gonna automatically update our timestamps. Timestamps, and it's gonna be true. Comma here. Okay, so we finished our first model here. So let's go to auth.js and try this. So I will come here and say register, and inside instead get I will say post, and here register. So I want to use this user model here, const user, and require models and user. Okay, we are gonna take information from client side, but before this I can write here const user, and it's gonna be new user, this model, and inside this I will write my properties. Username, let's say John, and email john@gmail.com, and password 1 2 3 4 5 6. And after that I will save this user. I can write here get to use browser, but before checking there is one more important thing. This process is an async function, so I should come here and say async, and this one should be await. If you don't know async and await or asynchronous functions, I'm gonna create a tutorial for this. You can check in the description below. So after this, it should be await also, because it's writing in the database here. And after this, I will just say res and send. Let's say okay for now. It's just for test. It's not real world example for now. Let's try right now. I will say register. Okay, and here I will check my collection. As you can see, our user is here and profile is empty, cover, followers and followings are empty. Awesome. So we are gonna use this. It should be post. We are gonna send our users as a request. So after that, I'm gonna use Postman. It's an awesome application for making requests for your application. So I'm gonna create here new collection. Let's rename it. It's gonna be social. And inside this, I'm gonna add a request. I will say here register user or create user, and it's gonna be post. And here I'm gonna write my localhost, our address here. And as you can see, there is body here. We are gonna send our user from this body. I will choose here row, and it's gonna be JSON. And here I'm gonna add my user. Username, let's say Jane, and email jane@gmail.com, and password, it will be 1 2 3 4 5 6. I can't send this right now because we didn't write anything inside. So I will write here const new user. So it's gonna be new user, and here I'm gonna use this request. And in request, inside body, we defined our properties here. And for username, it's gonna be request and body, and inside this username. And for the email and password. And after that, when you use async and await, you should write here try and catch block, because if any error occurs, this catch block will catch it, and after we can use any error handler or just print this in the console. Let's do this first. I will say const user and await new user and save. And for catch our error here, just console log this error. And after that, so I will say response and status, it's gonna be 200, which is successful. And after, let's say send or JSON this user. Let's try. As you can see, status 200, and here it turns our user. Let's check in the MongoDB. I will refresh this. And right now Jane is here also. Awesome. But our password is Jane also. There's a mistake here because I forgot changing this name. It's gonna be a password. But there is still problem because we can see these passwords here. We shouldn't expose any passwords anywhere. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some other library here. Yarn add and bcrypt. It's gonna allow us to change our password into some random gibberish code. So even if we see here this code, we can't decode it and we can't see the actual password. So let's come here and call this bcrypt const bcrypt, and it's gonna be bcrypt. It's a synchronous function also, so I'm gonna write this inside here. So firstly I'm gonna generate a salt, and after I will hash our actual password. What I mean by that, const salt is gonna be await and bcrypt, and I will say gin salt, let's say 10, you can change here, and after that const hashed password, and it's gonna be await again, bcrypt and hash, and inside it's gonna be our password, which is request body and password, and after that I'm gonna use this salt. So I generated new password here. I can't use it here because it's about hashed password here, so I will just move this here inside try catch. After that let's write here generate new password, and here create new user, and here save user and return response, or just response, or just respond. Okay, let's try right now. Let's change them. Hey, and here, and I will send. It's successful. Let's check here. John, Jane, and right now, as you can see, username hey, and our password is code here. Awesome. Right now our password is safe. Okay, but there is some error here. Deprecation warning. It happens because of our Mongos here, this version. So if you decrease this version, you can get rid of this error. It's nothing that important. It's not crucial. So I'm gonna just ignore this. Okay. Let's kill this one. We are not gonna use this terminal. Okay. So we can register with a user. So after that, I can write here login. Router, it's gonna be post again, and right now it's gonna be a login. I will close this, and here it's gonna be a request and response again, and after that let's come to Postman, and here I'm gonna create new one, add request, and it's gonna be login. I will just copy this and paste here, and right now it's gonna be login. So what I'm gonna pass here, I will say again raw and JSON, and for login process we are gonna ask user to enter his email and password. hey@gmail.com. Okay, it's correct. And here our password, it was 123456. Okay, we are gonna use this one. Of course, it's gonna be post again. So I'm gonna try to find this user here. To do that, I will use const user and await, and here async, of course. I will use this model and I will say find one, because it's only one document inside in same name. So I'm gonna pass my object here, email, and it's gonna be request and body and email. I will say here, if there is no user like that, I'm gonna say res.status. I will say 404, which means not found status, and I will say send user not found. Of course, it should be inside try and catch block. And catch, I will say error. Let's console.log. And I forgot writing here slash. Let's try and see. I will change this email name and I will send, and as you can see 404, let's check, user not found. Awesome. What I'm gonna do is checking this time this password. I will say here const valid password, and it's gonna be await, and right now I'm gonna use another function of this bcrypt. I will say compare. We are gonna compare this request body password and actual password inside this database. So what I'm gonna compare, I will say request body and password, and I will compare this with user.password. If password is not valid, I will send again response status. Right now it's gonna be 400 because wrong password, and here JSON, let's say wrong password. Let's try it again. Right now it's gonna be correct, and this is gonna be wrong password. I will send, and 400 bad request, and inside this wrong password. Awesome. So after all of that, if the user enters the valid email and password, it's gonna send status 200, and it's gonna send our user to us, JSON user. Let's try right now. I will make it correct also. And right now, as you can see, it turned back to our user. So we completed our login process also. Of course, we should validate these inputs first, because for example, if I delete this or this password, if I click the send, it's still gonna send this request and it's gonna turn user not found. And also, we don't have any custom error handler also. We are just writing here errors, but I'm not gonna deep dive into everything. We can validate them in the client section. It's just a couple of lines in HTML. But instead console log, I can send this as a response. I can say status 500 and JSON, maybe this error. And also here, Okay, so in the user root, I'm gonna add some request titles here, and we will take care of them. First will be update user, and second will be delete user, get a user, get all users. Actually, in real world social media application, we don't need them. We never get all users. So I can say follow a user and unfollow. And also I will go to user model and I will add some additional information here. And after is admin, I will say description. And it's gonna be type string. And maximum, let's say 50. And after that, I will add some city informations. It can be current city or just city. And type string. And again, max 50. And I will say from. It's gonna be hometown city. And after that, it's gonna be relationship. And it's gonna be type number. And I will give some options here. And user can just use 1, 2, or 3. I will say enum and 1, 2, 3. 1 can be single, maybe married or complicated or something like that. Actually, the better idea is creating info model here and write them inside this one. But I don't want to make this tutorial that much long, and inside users table, it's perfectly okay for now. In the future, we are gonna build really huge application. It's gonna take around maybe 10 hours or more. So we will build everything in depth detail. So stay tuned, and for now, let's go to the user. I will just close this one. And out also. Okay, for update, I will say router, and it's gonna be put because it's updating process. And I will say slash and ID. It's gonna allow us to choose any ID numbers here, any user IDs. For example, when I write here, for example, 1, 2, 3, it's gonna be a user ID. And I can use here whatever I want. And I will say again, inside async, and it's gonna be request and response. Firstly, I'm gonna verify if the user ID doesn't match with this ID, we are gonna return some error. So I will say if, let's say request body, and it's gonna be user ID. When we send this request, we are gonna write here user ID, and we will try to match with this ID. If they match, it means it's the same user. Otherwise, the user can't update or delete any other user's account. So I will say if equals request and params and ID, which means this ID. This is a parameter. And also I will check whether it's admin or not. I will say and user and is admin. So I will write my processes here. So if not, I will say else. And I'm gonna return some error here. Response status, and it's gonna be 401 or 3. And I will say JSON, and I will send you can update only your account. Okay, so what I'm gonna write here, let's check here. A user can update any informations here, but if you remember, we have password issue here, so I will check this. If request and body and password. If user try to update password, I'm gonna try and generate this password again. Const salt and await. And it's gonna be 10. Of course, we should just call this const bcrypt. Okay. And after that, I will update my request. It's gonna be body and password. And I will say await bcrypt and hash. I'm gonna hash this password first. And here our salt. Okay. We send some password inside this body in Postman. And we are gonna generate new password and hash, and we will update this request body and password. Okay, let's say catch an error. I will just return this. Of course, I can give some status. It's gonna be 500 again. Okay. Okay, we completed this password, and after that, I will update my actual user. I will say try again and const user and await. I will call my user, and here I will say find by ID and update, and I will give my user ID. Request params and ID, or request body and user ID, doesn't matter. Okay, we found our user here, and after that what I'm gonna do is set request and body. So it's gonna automatically set all inputs inside this body. And after that, I will say status, it's gonna be successful. And after that, let's say JSON and account has been updated. And of course, I will catch here. And I will send this error also. Okay, let's try. Our user collection is empty, so let's create new one. I will come to register and send. Let's check here. Okay, it's here. So I'm gonna update this. I will just take this user ID and I will create new request here. It's gonna be put, and I will rename this also. It's gonna be users and user ID. I will come to body and row, and I will choose JSON here. So let's try to update something inside. I can update one of them here. Let's say description. Hey, it's my updated description. And after that, I will indicate my user ID. And it's gonna be the same. Let's check. Account has been updated. Let's check in MongoDB here. Okay, perfect. If I update my password, let's try. Okay, it's successful here. And inside this, as you can see, it's hashed again. Perfect. I will make this bigger also. Okay, it's better. So let's do for deleting process. I will say, actually I can copy this and we can edit some points. I will say copy and paste here. Okay, this time it's gonna be delete. And again ID. It's gonna check the user. If it's not, we will send you can delete on your account. And after that, we don't need any password process here. And here I will say delete one, and it's gonna be our user ID. And here account has been deleted successfully. Let's check here. I will create new one, and it's gonna be delete user. And inside body, I will choose raw and JSON. So I will write here user ID. If I send here something wrong, I will say send. Nothing happened. Let's check here. Cannot read property is admin. Oh, I set here request user, it's gonna be body, and for update also. Okay, let's try right now. I will send again, and it's gonna turn you can delete only your account. Perfect. So if I write here this user ID, there is an error again. Let's check. Delete one. As you can see, we just write here user ID, but we didn't say anything delete by ID or something. So we should indicate here our user ID. So it's gonna be ID. And is there any function like that? Delete by ID or not? Yeah, find by ID and delete. So we can just turn back to previous version. Let's try again. Account has been deleted. Perfect. Let's check here. Okay, we don't have any results here. So let's make request for getting a user. I will say router, and it's gonna be get, and again slash and ID async request and response, and it's gonna be try and catch block. I will send my error here, and inside this I will say const user and my model here, and find by ID, and it's gonna be our parameter. And ID. Of course, it's gonna be await. If we can find any user here, we are gonna just turn this back. I will say response, and status will be 200 successful, and I will say JSON, and it's gonna turn us this user. Let's register first. Okay, this is our user. Let's take here our user ID. this one, and I will create new request. It's gonna be this address, and I will change here. If I say send, okay, we have user. But there's a problem here because we have all properties of this user, for example, password, or is admin, for example, update. We don't need them, so we can choose some of them. So how I'm gonna do that? I will come here, and before this sending response, I will say const, and I will create an object. These unnecessary properties, I will say password, maybe updated at. Okay, that's enough. I will say others. I will just spread other properties here. And here I will say user and document. This document basically carries our all object here, this one. So what I'm gonna do is sending this other. I will not use password or updated at. Let's try. I will say send. And right now, as you can see, there is no password. There is no updated at. Awesome. So let's follow some user here. Router, it's gonna be put, because we are gonna update some lists inside this user. I will say ID again, and slash follow, async and request response. So I want to verify something here. I will say request and body and user ID. If it equals this parameter ID, request and params and ID. So it means they are same user. So let's make here not. So I will say as, and if it's same user, I will say response and status 403. And I will send this error. I will say you can't follow yourself. And here I will write try catch block. Response and status is gonna be 500 and JSON this error. So I'm gonna find user which has this ID. I will say const and user await, and I will find this user dot find by ID, and it's gonna be request and params and ID. And also I will find this current user, and it's gonna be body and user ID. So I'm gonna control something here. I will say if the user and followers, and I will say includes request body and user ID. If the user which we are trying to follow already includes this current user as a follower, I will turn some other error here. Res and send, but before status 403. I'm not sure it's correct status code or 401 is better. Let's check. Access to requested source is forbidden. So it's okay, I think. So I will say JSON. You already follow. So if it's not, I will update this user and this current user also. I will say await and user and update one. So what I'm gonna do is saying here push, because we are gonna push some IDs inside followers, and then followers. And what I'm gonna push inside these followers, it's gonna be request and body and user ID. So I'm gonna do the same thing for current user. And this time it's not gonna followers, it's gonna followings. And after that, I will just send this. User has been followed. So what we exactly did here? Firstly, we checked whether these users are same. If they are same, we are just gonna send this error. You can follow yourself. And after that, we found this user, which has this ID, and also current user, which is trying to make request. And after that, if the current user is not following this user, we just said update this followers and followings arrays. Let's try. To try that, I should create another user here. Let's make zoom out here. Okay, it's better. Let's say John. Let's create. Okay, this is gonna be our current user. Let's take this ID here. I will create new request. It's gonna be put users, user ID, and follow. I will choose row and JSON here. I will give my user ID. And inside, oh, we deleted all users here before. So I'm gonna create second one. Let's say Jane. Okay, let's take this ID also. And here, I will just paste here. Okay, this is John and this is Jane. Let's try. User has been followed. Let's try here. I will refresh. Oh, sorry, it's here. We just didn't refresh. But anyway, okay, John is here. Let's check followings, because we followed Jane. Okay, followers are here, but there is a silly mistake here, as you can see. Let's go to model. Not followings, followings. Okay, I will just edit them. Okay, and here it's gonna be followings, and also I will delete inside these followers because we are gonna add again. Let's update. Okay, they are correct right now and empty, and I will send again. Let's refresh. And for John, I'm checking followings. Okay, it's our ID. We made another silly mistakes. And here I'm gonna add not user ID, params and ID. So I will delete again. So I'm gonna try last time. I hope everything will be okay. Let's refresh. Okay, it's chain, and here followers, it's okay, it's John. Perfect. So for unfollowing, I will just copy this and paste after this. And right now it's gonna be unfollow. I'm gonna change something here. Already unfollow. Okay, it's not the best sentence, but anyway, I will say unfollowed. Okay, maybe I can say don't follow. And right now, I'm not gonna push. I'm just gonna pull from this followers and followings array. And here, it's not gonna be not, because if this user includes this ID, this block will be run. Let's save it and try here. This time it's gonna be unfollow and send. User has been unfollowed, and here I will refresh, and right now it's empty, and for Jane it's empty. Awesome. So we completed our user requests. Let's close this and create some other model here. Okay, I will copy this, and inside models I will create post.js, and I will just paste it, and it's gonna be not user, it's gonna be post, and here post schema, and inside this I will delete them. Okay, first one will be user ID, type will be string, and it's gonna be required. And after that I will add description, type string, and it's gonna be max 500 characters, and we can add some image, string, and after that I will create some array for likes. Type array, and default will be empty array. And here I will just close this curly parenthesis and comma. Okay, it's ready, I think. User ID, description or image, and it's gonna be default likes. Let's add this inside index, but before we should create roots. It's gonna be posts.js. I will call this router, and after that I will just export this. Okay, I can write right now. I will come here and say post root. It's gonna be posts, and here it's gonna be post. Okay, let's try router, and I will say get for the home page, request response, and I will say just console.log post page. I can try on the browser and enter post page. Okay, it works. I can close this, and I will delete this here, And I will write my titles here. Create a post, update, and here it's gonna be delete, and like a post, get a post, and get all posts. But it's not gonna call all posts, it's just gonna get all posts of the user's followings. Let's say here timeline. And here basically we will just call all followings of the user and then all posts of these users. Okay, let's create. I will say router, it's gonna be post and request response. Of course it's gonna be async function. I will say const new post. I will call this post model. I should call it here, of course, const post, and it's gonna be require models and post. Okay. I will say new post, and inside this post I will just say request and body. So let's write here try catch. Rest.status is gonna be 500, and JSON, let's say error. And inside this I'm gonna create new one. So const saved post, it's gonna be await, and I'm gonna save this new one. And after that I'm gonna turn this as a response, and status will be 200, and JSON, I will just send this post. Okay, let's try. By the way, we didn't give any name for them. I will say get user and save. And this one will be follow. And I will just duplicate this. It's gonna be unfollow user. And here the address will be unfollow. Okay, let's save. And after that I will create new post request here. Create new post, or just post, and it's gonna be post. Okay, so inside this body I will say JSON, and here I will write my user ID, we will find this later, and here description, hey, it's my first post. And after that we can add some image, or we can just leave this empty. It's gonna be only description. So let's check here. It will be Jane. I will copy this. And let's send. So as you can see, our post is here. Let's check in the MongoDB. I will just refresh and we will choose post here. Awesome. I will just open this in new tab, and here for users, let's choose this John. From John. And after that I will add some image. image.png and send. Okay, perfect. It's from Jane and it's from John. And for the update, I will say router and put, and as always request response, and after that, and it should be post ID, of course. So I will verify this user again. To do that, I will find this post, of course async here, and I will say const post and post find by ID. It's gonna be this ID, request and params and ID. And after that, we are gonna check the owner of this post. I will say if post.userid equals request and body and our user ID. If it's the same, so we can update this. If it's not, I will just turn some error. And JSON, I will say you can update only your post. And of course, I should put this into try catch. And JSON error. It should be await. Okay. So it's gonna check this post. So even if there is no post like this, it's gonna turn 500. It should be 404. So we can write here where status and 404 and post not found. But anyway, we have error here. I will not handle all these errors. We are gonna handle all these errors later. So inside this, I will say await and post and update one. And I will set inside this body. And after that, I will send this. The post has been updated. Okay, I will create new one. I will just copy this. Update post, and here it's gonna be put. I'm gonna check this first one. It's our post ID, and here inside body I will choose row and JSON, and here I will write user ID, and it's gonna be John's ID, and here I will change this description. Let's try. Has been updated to 100, and here perfect. If I write here wrong user ID, it's gonna say you can update only your post. Awesome. So I will copy this, and for the delete I will paste. It's gonna be delete, and everything is same, and here I will say delete one, and here delete it and delete. Okay, I will come here, choose delete, And for the wrong user ID, it's gonna send some error. If I write here correct one, it's gonna delete. I will check here. Perfect. We deleted. Right now we are gonna like some post here. I will say router, and it's gonna be put again, and post ID, and after that I will say like. And I'm gonna find this post again, await, and post, find by ID. It's gonna be request and params and ID. I will say try, and catch error, and JSON this error. Okay, after finding this post, I'm gonna check whether this post like array includes this user or not. I will say if the post, and it's gonna be this likes array, and includes request and body and user ID. And after that I will say await and post update one, and I'm gonna push this user ID. Remember how we are doing this, and I will say likes and request and params, body, and it's gonna be user ID. And after that I will send this, post has been liked. I will do the same thing for this like in the same function. So if this post likes include this user ID, it's gonna like this post. If it's not, I will say as and await post update one, and right now I will just pull item from this array. I will say pull, and after that likes and request and body user ID, and after that I can say disliked maybe. Okay, so we are gonna check this likes array. If it includes this user ID, it's gonna like. If it's not, it's gonna dislike. I will say like, dislike here. Let's try. It's our post. I will choose this, and here I will create like and dislike post, and here I will say posts, this post ID, and it's gonna be put, and here I will write my user ID. It can be John, and it's gonna be like here. Let's send. Okay, some error occurs here. I will check. I should write here first request and then response, because it says request status is not a function. So let's try right now. I will send. Okay, let's check. And in likes array, okay. So we liked our own post here. So good, we completed this also. Let's try to fetch some post. So I will say router, and it's gonna be get an ID here, request, response. I will say try and catch. I will catch my error here, and inside this response, JSON, and I'm gonna send this error. And inside this try, I will say const post, and it's gonna be post and find by ID. I will pass this parameter, request, and params. It's gonna be ID. After finding this post, I'm gonna send as a response, and status will be successful. And after that, I will send this. I'm coming to Postman and add new request. It's gonna be get. I will write here get a post. And here it's gonna be posts, and our post ID here, this one. Okay, I will just send. There is error here because we forgot this await here. And again, I'm gonna send, and this is our post. Perfect. So let's try to do these timeline posts. I will say again router, and it's gonna be get. And here I will write timeline async request response. So I'm gonna create an array here. I will say post array. It's gonna be empty first, and after I will just fetch all these posts. I will say try. I will do this quickly. Response status, it's gonna be 500, and JSON error. So how I'm gonna fetch all this data? I'm gonna use something different here. Instead of await, I'm gonna use promise, because we will have multiple promises. So firstly, I'm gonna find current user. It's gonna be user, of course first await, and I will say find by ID, and inside request and body and user ID. And after that, I'm gonna add all posts of this current user to this post array. I will say const user posts and await post.find. So I will say user ID, it's gonna be equal current user dot ID, because in the post model we have user ID here. We will just try to find all posts of this user, and after that I will try to find all posts of these followings. I will say const friend posts. It's gonna be await, and I'm gonna use here promise dot all, because we are gonna use map here. If you are using any loop, you should use promise all. Otherwise, it's not gonna fetch all of this. If you use await here inside map, it's not gonna fetch. I will say current user and followings, and I will use here map. Let's say friend ID, and for each friend ID, I will say post dot find, and again user ID equals friend ID. Actually, I was going to use post array and first add this one and after this one, but we don't need that. I can delete this. I can just basically concat these two arrays. I will say res and JSON user posts and concat. It's gonna be friend posts. It's gonna take all posts of friends and concat with this posts. Let's try. Firstly, I'm gonna add some posts as chain. Where was this post? Here. And my user chain. I will copy this ID and here I will say from chain. And I will say chain 2. And let's add for John also. John 2. Okay, let's check first here. Okay, from John, from Jane, Jane 2 and John 2. So firstly, I'm gonna follow John. I will come here and our user ID. I can copy this. And for John. So basically, I'm gonna follow John as a Jane. I will say send. And after that, as Jane, I'm gonna try to fetch all timeline posts. I will add request, timeline posts. Posts and timeline. And in the body, I will indicate my user ID. User ID will be Jane's ID, which is this one. I'm saying send. It's gonna be a dot here. And also I should return posts because it's gonna return each post inside this array. Let's try again. It's about naming. That because it's conflicting with this get post, because it's get also, so it takes this timeline text as an ID. So I should just change this, let's say all, and start again. Let's try again. Of course, I should write all. Right now it works perfectly. From Jane, Jane 2, and John, John 2. If I make request as John, let's write here. As you can see, it just returns John's posts because it doesn't follow anyone. Awesome. So we finished post router also. Of course, something missing in this API because we are not using any error handling, or we can use JWT verification later. But right now, for the beginning, it's totally enough. In the next lesson, we are gonna use error handlers and we are gonna build our React application. So after that, we will not use Postman. We will make this request on our own application. So it's pretty much all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. So you can find useful resources and source code of this API in the description below. If you want to see more tutorials like this, you can subscribe to the channel and like the video. So I will see you in the next video.